interventions, instruction, support in our schools. My name is Christina Miller. I'm the Executive Director at U.S. Math Recovery Council. We're a nonprofit whose work and mission is dedicated to transforming numeracy, to educating and empowering teachers, and really empowering our students to advance their math thinking and do whatever they would like to do, have those options available for them inside of math fields.
I'm Petey McCarthy. I'm the Director of Professional Development for the U.S. Math Recovery Council, one of the original founders of the nonprofit and one of the authors of the professional development programs that are part of it. We are one of the vendors for the math academies that are available throughout the state, and then we've also been just invited to share with you kind of the work that we do and hopefully answer some of your questions or be able to point you in the direction of some resources that might help you with the work you're doing.
So take a moment to introduce yourself to your neighbor and share one reason that you decided to join this session today.
I think we've run into each other.
I am on 401 in a place where there are more cows than kids. I think I could get better math than the cows right about now too. I tell you, I have my new theory is that to find the person that it gives me. I just need to find a man or woman who's like, hey, if you're 9 or 12 and you want to drink free, come here and test me. Because that's the only thing that explains some of our problems.
We think that students with math for the last couple of years, using resources, developing a core curriculum map, so that way we're kind of immersing people in the conversation around the standards. We're still struggling with the level of expectation for grade level content. That's a big struggle for us. Obviously, the 7th and 8th grade discussions we were just having. I teach math. It's a big discussion for us. And really getting the concept that throughout K-12, we should be running up Bloom's taxonomy at every grade level, right? We shouldn't be staying in that lower recall, level, but actually giving kids real world problems. So they're doing more analysis, they're doing more synthesis, they're integrating content rather than seeing math as this silo,
Just the mathematical thing. And one of the challenges, the reason that the sessions is that we've done the math on schedule, so the students have a full year.
Take 1 minute.
What the teachers do with the extra is the key. It's not just about variety. So all they're doing is more of the same. That might help a little bit, but it's not going to help much. What are the intervention strategies that they can target to the students? I don't know what they should know with teachers are doing. So I look towards intervention strategies that work.
Based on, because they have the time, so they could in fact do center work as part of core instruction. What does it look like this year? What are remediate centers?
Just that whole how do you we have nothing in place for our teachers right now. They're kind of on their own. We don't have any.
And wrap your conversations up. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Today, we will begin by taking a look at core instruction, then segueing into targeted supports. PD transitions, we transitioned it to PD in the presentation at targeted supports and intensive supports. And then finally, we'll wrap up our session with how these supports are fluid inside of our system. Our core instruction. We have a video. This one is a video published by UQ. That's a fantastic, just math mindset. Yeah, if you're not familiar with it, you are. Yeah, great resources on research, resources that as school leaders you can use inside of communities to disrupt some of the biases there might be specifically with mathematics and who can do mathematics and access to mathematics. She's done a lot of her life work dedicated to that. Let's listen to some kids though and what they have to say about doing math. As we listen to kids, also take a moment to think about what do you think your kids, the students in your schools, would say about what it means to do mathematics.
Some people think I'm not good at math. I can never do anything. I'm not good at it. I'm just going to give up.
A lot of people think of it as like prison, like you don't have any freedom. Okay, time to go to your notebook. Okay, read chapter 1. Okay, here's your worksheet.
The math textbook, it's kind of like the Bible. You have to kind of worship the textbook. And I don't really like that.
Everybody's going so quickly, and I thought if I didn't go quick, people think I'm like not smart.
I made a lot of mistakes, and I got really sad about it.
You make a mistake, you're pretty much done. Yeah.
I can't do it fast, and they're so smart because they can, and I'm not smart, and I just kind of stopped.
You feel like you're serving a sentence for like nothing.
I love it. It does look like a keyboard.
I've done better with math when I was talking with people, sharing ideas.
4 or 5 brains work better than 1.
I'll see it one way, but then someone else will see it another way, and I'll be like, oh my gosh, that makes so much sense.
I love that we're getting different answers out because lots of problems in math, there are different answers.
Have more than one way to solve the question.
Because in real life, you're not going to just do one thing. You're going to do many things. You're going to need to use different methods.
Yay!
Hold on. Take your time and just experiment with every way that could possibly work.
You definitely have to be patient because certain problems, they take forever. Math isn't about speed, and you can make mistakes and you learn from them. Yeah, I did that too! Yes! Oh,
Math isn't like the enemy, and it can't hurt me.
you can run wild, you can pass ideas by each other.
I thought that math was all about right answers and wrong. Now that I believe that math is really about ideas and creativity, it's a lot more inspiring.
You can find that same video on ucube.org. There is the reference for that on the back of the single-page handout that we gave. And so you can go there, share it with your teachers if you want, or others in your community.
So, our statement of need, right, inside of these spaces and thinking about what are our students saying that math is. This early mindset that continues to compound as they go through from elementary to middle to high school. All these mindsets, wherever we enter them, right, is a foundation for our greater math achievement. Many of you were in a session yesterday and you saw Kelsey, and we were talking about diagnostic assessments and asking a new question that would help us reveal what was going through the mind of a student as they solved somewhat
what we might call of our basic operations, really required to do much more of the complex work that many of us are assessing and receiving feedback about how our students are doing that. And she talked about how that stopped making sense when she was really young. So what is our call to action, as we'll talk about here throughout our nuggets and elements inside of the work that helps us create classrooms that engage, inspire, and support students to just begin the journey and to chip away at that journey through multiple layers and steps.
Yeah, student growth, that's something I've been hearing as I've been sitting in on some conversations these last 2 days. And the challenge about maybe even if your state assessment scores are looking just fine, right? But maybe the student growth isn't quite where you want it to be. So I've heard some situations like that. I've also heard situations on the other end where, you know, we're getting student growth, but our MCAS results aren't quite where we want them to be yet. And so how are we going to help support the building of classrooms? If you don't mind backing up just a little bit. Yeah, building of classrooms and teacher knowledge so that we can have classrooms that inspire and engage. Move away from the right answer being the primary goal, right? And instead about learning about the patterns of mathematics and the beauty of mathematics. Our goal really is to keep kids in math classes, right? We really want them taking as many math classes as we can offer them. What return are you getting right now as far as kids staying in math classes as they go through their high school careers?
Well, even, I mean, I teach 6th grade math, and I taught 7th and 4, and the first day of the class, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna take a poll. Who likes math? And, you know, some kids raise their hand, and some kids are like, no. And I'm like, who hates math? And they all look around, and I'm like, and they're like, you're the math teacher. And I'm like, yeah, and sometimes it really bothers me. So I hate math. Like, how do you guys feel? Like, oh my God, I hate it. The worst subject ever. Then they all start talking. And it's like, okay, so now you've given me a dare, and you're daring me to get you to like math by the end of the year. And like, I start that way with them, but they come in like hating it. And it's not unusual. And so I'm always trying to make it more interesting and fun, but I tell them all the time, there are going to be days that it's boring because it's just numbers, but I'll try to make it as fun as I can. But I think how it affects them moving forward is, you know, it's all about their experiences.
Yes. You know, I had 2 students in 8th grade math, and they both were straight A students, ended up being valedictorians, co-valedictorians in their senior year. Both headed off to fantastic, one to MIT, another to a private college. And in following their careers and knowing their parents and having those conversations, the one student really did have numeracy behind his understanding of math. And even though they took much the same pathways, he walked out of there following or pursuing a career in mathematics. The other student, even though she'd taken same tracks, right, of mathematics courses, she walked out of there saying, if I go into college having to take math classes, I'm going to puke. I just can't stand it. I hate math, right? Even though she'd taken AP classes in math. She'd basically done that to open doors for herself and struggled through, but had very limited numeracy foundation in order to support what she was doing. So it hurt her, right? It made things very difficult when she was trying to work through those math classes. So we want to see the changes there. And that's where we're thinking about, you know, the whole affect side of this as well. There's a social emotional learning to mathematics. And I hear that with your story about, you know, hating math. And I want to ask if you are in a leadership role in your building, especially in an elementary school, how many of your elementary teachers really see math as their passion and they love the opportunity to teach math every day? We took a survey when we first got into working with elementary teachers, and We actually found out that there were many teachers that was the class that they chose to skip. A shortened day, they didn't teach math, right? What were they doing as far as providing opportunities for kids to be creative and to try on different strategies? Oh, don't want to go there, right? Because they were afraid that the kids might bring forth something that they really didn't have the background to know if it was accurate or not, or to help them draw the connections. So we have challenges in the domain of mathematics education, right? In that we're overcoming some people's histories with the subject as they have experienced it as a learner themselves. That makes things maybe doubly difficult, right? It's still okay in our world for parents and for adults to say, I didn't get math, that's okay. And that's not the situation in literacy. Yes?
And just to piggyback on that, not only is it okay for them to say that, but that if that kind of affect doesn't happen with other subject areas.
Yeah.
We don't hear people talking about reading and writing and social studies and gym and all these other subjects like people talk about math.
And there's been some research in the last 10 years that is saying that mathematics is actually probably one of the most important subjects for later success in college and beyond, right? It opens the doors for them.
And I think it connects back to everything. Someone said something about math doesn't make sense, and they learned from an early age that math doesn't make sense, and I think that's one of the scariest things for us as elementary people, math should make sense, and it's our job to lay a foundation where it does, just like in literacy when we're reading, things have to make sense.
And we add in elementary, but and middle, and in high, right? I do what I do. It came from elementary teaching, came from coaching and leading, right, math initiatives in terms of PD and those kinds of things in a district and in a building and in multiple environments. My own kids, right? Like that's what we do. We talk about math. It makes sense. Math is supposed to make sense, that narrative. And my daughter is now a senior in high school in her AP Calc. And I'm like, no, honey, like why are you where's the application? Why do you do this? Mom, I just need to get my A. I need to do my work. It doesn't make sense, Mom, and it's not going to, and we're fine, right? That narrative changed, and you can't, and it really in school is kind of where, like my voice just didn't matter in that one all throughout the years. So, yeah.
I was just saying that I used to teach in the high school level for math, and I was always the teacher that was teaching the very foundation course, the kids that struggle. And it changed, the language they use changes. It's not, I hate math, I can't do math. Yeah. And I felt I used more of my guidance counselor skills in that class.
Yeah.
Like I felt like it was like a counseling session every day, and the way that I was teaching math.
Yeah.
Like just to get their self-confidence up, get to want to do the math and accept the ability to do it. So that's really important.
You have a generation of people that didn't do math or do math at all. I mean, when I was in school, my 9th grade and 10th grade, I didn't have a math teacher the whole year because, circumstances, heart attack for one person, unfortunately, and 17 subs, and then another year. So the parents that we deal with look at that type of math, well, wasn't that big of an issue, or I don't understand it themselves. So if they don't understand it, how do they communicate it to you? And the elementary teachers don't. So it's a battle. It's an uphill battle.
Yeah, it really contains all the drivers, right? Yeah. Like, when we change the narrative, we change that school and at home. Yeah.
I hate to contradict what everyone said because I believe it's absolutely accurate for a large majority of people. But that's not everyone's experience with math. And when you're talking about things making sense, I'm thinking of those goddamn multiple choice questions. The author should have named it this, the title should be, like, I don't know, but give me a math problem and I'm good. I know that I've got it or I don't have it, and I love that sense of it makes sense to me. So, that's not the experience of most teachers or most kids, but you do have some in this multi-tiered system of support And I'm thinking about the kids who are absolutely struggling on one end, and I'm thinking about some of the other kids who are just wondering, when do I get to do some math?
And just to build off that statement, this is really going to oversimplify because there's a lot more nuances in it. But if you take what everyone has said and you thread that needle and you think, okay, if we're likely to encounter people at the elementary level who may not have been mathematics majors. So their strategy when they encounter something novel, unfamiliar, or challenging might be to avoid it. And then you get to secondary teachers who probably, if they are teaching math made sense to them and they like it. And now they're encountering a group of students for whom it does not make sense. Talk about a perfect storm, right? People who say, well, what do you mean this doesn't make sense to you? And yeah, so just think about that trajectory that could happen in a lot of cases.
And it does, and I think that is where we get sometimes, and so Petey needs to piggyback a little bit on this as well, like where we have high school teachers engaging in some of this, how does the development of mathematics occur, right, from this very young age? Now, at a very, kind of tactical level, I'm teaching, a calculus class or an advanced algebra class. Why do I need to learn about how these first through third graders are developing their math knowledge? The answer in that helps us understand perhaps why I have an 11th grader or a 10th grader and what happened along the way. And I mainly worked with 4th, 5th, and 6th grade teachers when I did my work. And inside of that, all the time I would have a teacher look at me and say, do you mean like I have to go back and teach those places that they missed? And the answer is resounding yes. They become 20-year-olds in my undergrad programs that still solve math the same way. They become your teachers who also cry when asked to do math problems in contexts where they feel safe. They get to be 30, 40, 50. It just doesn't happen if we don't do something. So let's talk about how to do something, right? We've definitely identified. Yes,
I had
please.
just one last thing, then I won't put my voice in the room again. But just as you're talking about what we do, it's just interesting. Barbara and I were talking about when we came in. So one thing that I don't think is unique to us is that when told, when the question is, does that mean I have to go back and teach these things? And the answer is a resounding yes. The challenge becomes when that resounding yes translates into, I'm overstating the case, but I'm going to say it, I will teach nothing but math facts for a semester, and as Barbara so accurately put it, means that in fact, we're not teaching grade level content in mathematics. If that, as she described it, if that steadfast adherence to sequential procedural knowledge, if people refuse to deviate from it, where we end up is middle and high school classes in which it's not being taught at grade level content. So it's just as you're discussing this, that resounding yes response, I want strategies for how it doesn't turn into what I just described.
Thank you, thank you, yes. Because that is exactly, it is not that you go back and teach it in that way. And to add to, the drilling of math facts might have perhaps added to why we ended up where we are. So not only a response for me, but yes. So let's go into tier 1 for a bit.
Boy, you
and
throw
I
some
think
things out there.
this does. So this gets us narrowed into a teacher making decisions inside of their classroom related to instruction, and the knowledge that the teacher has both about the mathematics content itself. Now, this one happened to be the people who participated in my dissertation, and those of you that have done dissertations, the best dissertation is a done dissertation, and I took the age group of teachers who were willing to work with me. And that happened to be at first grade. So the content for this teacher wasn't necessarily completely at issue. However, multiple strategies may have been, right? Memorize versus multiple strategies. So we're going to take a think about, as I unfold the story here quite quickly, what does the teacher know in terms of content, in terms of pedagogy, in terms of her students? And here's a little glimpse into her class. So I did start the story just a little bit, but there's actually a lot more to the instruction aspect. One thing we need to know about Carol, and that's her name in my study, is she does have diagnostic information around all of her students. However, they do not have it as a uniform thing that they're in, or a uniform practice across their grade level, and they have 7 teachers. It also is, they do not have a part of the regular system of having data conversations. So here's Carol, she received data, and I did the data, right? Like that was part of the dissertation. I actually helped to kind of assess for her so she would have it all at a really timely place. The day that the way this unfolded was over 3 months. She had, I observed the beginning of the year lessons, right in September, another set of lessons in October-ish, and then the final set of lessons in December. Carol did have some professional learning experiences in a course called AVMOC Course 1, probably 2 or 3 years prior. The data I gave her was all content from that course. Wondering what she does with it 2 or 3 years later. And she hadn't done anything with it, really. Like she received it, she said, thank you, thank you. Okay. First set of lessons, when I went to observe, I did 3 days in a row. That becomes kind of important to see how does she respond. First set of lessons, straight out of the book, right? Way too easy. They're in first grade. 90% of her class can not only count to 20, they can write to like 50. So it's a little bit speaking true. Her first 3 lessons were spinning a spinner to 5 on the first day. They traced a 5, and then they wrote a 5. That's a common lesson in a first grade curriculum, which 4 of her kids actually needed out of 24. She did that the next day with 6 through 9, right? That's how that's common in ways that start. Her students, they're organized in their tables. They all have, they're collaborative, right? We value team, we value collaborative, we have a conversation. In the conversations with Carol, she could tell me all of those things that I really want, that we want to hear about engaging content, all of that. Her students are organized by their tables, by their literacy scores. That's what she knows. That's what she, yep. Okay, fair enough. All right, next, October. Students are in the same space, right? But we have a different lesson. Her colleague went to a course, did a conversation, different lesson. The lesson now is a little bit more spot on. We're working with some tools. We're bringing in talking, engaging, engagement. And she opens it up. It's very much, it has multiple entry points. It's a great text. It has, she has students go back to their tables after she introduces it large group. They are still in their liturgy, kind of common, so using the data was maybe not quite, but other kids get to their tables and it's chaos. You have they're not on the task. Most of them are coming up with solutions that do not match the objective. Somewhere in the translation of what students are supposed to think really hard about in this really what could have been a really authentic task, it mislinked. She knew right away. She looked up at me and she's like, deer in the headlights, oh no, what do I do? And those of you that were here yesterday, what did she do? She kept going. She plotted through. I came back the next day to see the next lesson. So this is a little bit further out of this story. I got it. Christina, I think I made some adjustments. I reflected on yesterday's practice. And as you see today, the lesson is, I think it's going to go a lot better. That's really important. A lot better. All right. I'm observing. You know what happened to the lesson? Yeah, it went a whole lot better. Yeah, absolutely. She modified the lesson so that compliance, you do what I say. There were no multiple access points anymore. They still have manipulatives. They were still at a table having conversations. But she told them how many colors, she told them in what ways, she fed them all the situation so that the kids could do nothing but get the right answer. So now they had now we actually complexified our problem. Because now students have right answers for wrong reasons. And now they've had success in a math lesson that actually is also not the right success. Okay. Professional growth experience after that, mid-November, right? And still adhering to good practices of studies, but also knowing just a little bit about what the courses itself talks a lot about what do you do with the information when you know that about your students. So in December when I got back, the data I had given her in September, which actually was at least a bit outdated, however, was way more on point than where those lessons were headed, right? So she had rearranged her students by what she knew about their math knowledge. She had a new lesson. Now this time she took it out of the resources from the PD. That wasn't the important part. It was a task that you can have multiple entry points, but so was her amazing curriculum. She had high quality core curriculum. She did. She went in, when I went into the lesson, her intention was good, her learning goal was much better. It was more in fluency to 20, but using authentic strategies and conversation. She had the students grouped in new ways. The outcome was, again, she was really low on the rigor for many, many of her kids. However, she recognized it. And immediately she stood, she looked up, she thought, she went over and grabbed multiple dice. And in no joke, less than 3 minutes, she had 3 different modifications of that game using dice and having students do different things with those dice, like add the first 2, subtract 1. Now cover that on your board. Now instead of having 2 add-ins, have 3 add-ins, right? And she, on the spot, changed the task by walking around the room and giving them individual directions. Now, could someone still pick apart some of her choices in math, like her expertise? Of course. However, the response that she had to the issue that she faced in front of her in her core instruction with high quality materials was deeply changed because of the kinds of conversations that she'd had about what do I do with teaching, and then to the point of what are the actual strategies of differentiation that I can have. I can change my choices, my number choices. So there's the place to, belief about I can do math, mindset, and then equipping our teachers to be able to have those skills and knowledge to be able to make some of those, to make those decisions in that moment. And I think I probably need to
leave this up here. John Hattie, one of the pieces out of Visible Learning for Math. And there is
so much more in that because you could spend days probably talking about some of those nuances and decisions and multiple what they know about the content system.
So whether you are focusing today on your elementary needs, your middle school needs, or your high school needs, the conversation about the research study, I think you can take and you can extrapolate it to the other grade levels about what kind of tier 1 core instruction, right, that you want going on within your buildings. So thinking about the period of time, I think it was 3 months,
It was
right?
3 months, yeah, September
In 3
to
months
December.
period of time, that teacher who was a veteran teacher, somewhat entrenched in the ways that she had been doing business for a number of years, was able with some support and some guidance to then take advantage of the professional development that she was offered. So that is a part of thinking about your infrastructure needs. And I'd like for you to maybe just at your tables to talk about what do you need to maybe infuse into your system or strengthen within your system in order to help teachers be able to provide a stronger, a richer core tier 1 experience for your teachers. So maybe just take a minute, talk at your tables.
We're doing more coaching this year than ever. We're still learning expertise in coaching. So we have the structure. So not only that content and instruction expertise.
So we have a lot of systems, right, similar to your system. So if I look at 300 data, we have these great data systems too, so we have our fast food system, we have our screeners, we ask questions, this is a classified problem, or a small problem. The teachers look at this together, so I would take it out, really let teachers are in the room, I admit to making sure. I know our math teachers are doing a ton of work with math content taught, math taught, the difference, and really how they extract professional learning around that. Set up their goals, and I think they are doing science and professional learning is like break their card in a lot of models, and they make sure that together and know what we're going to be able to, I think we're struggling to be able to see the intervention is all trackable, like teachers, there's so much, oh my gosh, and to really get people thinking about right. So, and that has to be the content, it's very much like, and the teachers learn products, foods problem, comprehension problem, it just, and this thing matches, that example, and 30 kids, there's no joy. It's so wild.
When you look at the data around literacy, what we really are targeting is a soft skill deficit. And
I've seen more of math.
high school, secondary math, and elementary math, elementary math folks, math is about skill development, just like it is in literacy. It's about skill development. The disconnect that the high school folks have is because they're teaching algebra, they're teaching geometry, they're teaching pre-algebra, calculus, like those domains of math.
Okay, now work at your desk.
You may not understand those concepts, but have the skills. Or you may, but the assumption is, I don't understand these concepts and I don't have the skills. Like, or because I don't have the skills.
Is this a conceptual deficit, a practice, a math practice deficit, or is but they're much every class. You can't find when what you're doing is so the nice thing about this is do something teachers are thinking about they have to watch it and rather than not like grappling with things. Time is the most precious resource. So if like they still debate the fast bridges I did not on Wednesday. I do not agree with that
conversation on Wednesday.
I don't agree. I think I want more assessment so the teachers are just like not robots. So they're not wasting time. Sometimes they so much. It's like, I was motivated after a conference, but oh, forget it.
4, 3, 2, 1.
And they can measure it.
Would someone be willing to share something that you have discussed as a need or a way to strengthen your math instruction there locally? So when you're thinking about your infrastructure, anybody willing to share an idea?
We're talking about helping teachers to have a better understanding of what it looks like when students are solving problems. Jump in here if I'm not being accurate here. And my takeaway just from this quick conversation is a lead that I'd love to put into a staff meeting, and that's simply having teachers look at students solving problems collaboratively and being able to identify whether they understand it, what do you notice, what do you wonder about the student's process.
One thing that I would add to that before pulling more ideas from the group is that sometimes teachers are afraid to have a messy situation in their classroom because they think their administrator is looking for a neat, orderly, quiet environment, right?
Yeah, but
so I think a safe environment there is associated with this, right? And common expectations.
I was challenged that when principals walk in, it's always noisy, and I say, read the transcript, listen to the individual conversations, and find out if the kids are on task. It's noisy because when you have a lot of kids talking, it's noisy. So get the transcript of those individual conversations and find out, because chances are they're talking about what they need to be talking about. And if they aren't, bring them back.
And it's teachers require a lot of risk and vulnerability to learn inside of their practice. At the same time, they're getting And so that I guess that grace just a little bit in that there's learning. Like my transcript was great, but I have these ways of knowing it or improving it. It's knowing it's okay inside of my job, and I'm okay if I continue to try to work on that.
We were talking about how we can use data in a literacy model to really look at what is the sub-skill deficit that a student has that is the gap closer, and still looking for that correlation with respect to mathematics instruction around the idea that are the students not getting this algebraic concept, or is it that there is a sub-skill deficit in their mathematical thinking that is causing that, and then thinking about the one-size-fits-all is to go to, well, they don't know their math facts, right? And so the focus becomes about developing automaticity with math facts and not necessarily understanding, breaking down the standard into sub-skills of mathematical thinking.
So what is needed in your structure in order for that to grow and become impactful on student learning?
Yeah, jump on in.
So tools, what I wish, and I want to be clear, I'm not implying at all that my teachers who are working on data teams are behaving like robots. They are thinking robustly on these literacy data teams, and they argue sometimes with the data. They do not have to waste an inordinate amount of time with work that could be done via good assessment software. So there are systems like we use in literacy that identify those sub-skill foundational deficits, indicate if it's a class-wide instructional problem or a problem that just would be benefit a smaller group of students through supplemental instruction, then allows teachers to set up student groups, select an evidence-based intervention for the supplemental group, identify the assessment they'll use for progress monitoring, pick 8 prongs, collect the data, get back together, see if it worked, adjust their practice. Those tools don't dictate, they just prevent teachers from wasting time. They quickly get to see growth and change, they're highly motivated. I want to know where that is in math, and I'll buy it tomorrow. All right, so that collected in that way, and that clearly and coherently articulated, FastBridge hasn't done all the work in math yet. They're great at literacy. They even now link to intervention plans to help those teachers with videos of like, what might this look like in delivering instruction. But they would say their math side is not as robust. So that helping teachers do that work efficiently, given time constraints that they face, lead me to it.
It's in development. It is.
All right.
It's not. It is not. Yeah. I mean but the hard answer to that is just in the realm of mathematics as a subject, right, with its own history and its own complications. It has not gotten the research, the big things that literacy has for years and years. So it is. I think everyone's working hard to kind of help get that in a way that is still really authentic to the creativity, the engagement, the accuracy, the multiple subset of skills that are a part of mathematics, right? Without it just resorting to, let's see how fast you can do your 8s. Yeah.
So one of the things that I discovered several years ago in a 3rd grade classroom as a coach, and working on fractions, and kids had some typical misconceptions, and I was talking with the teacher after that and said, every year you're going to have kids that are going to come into this lesson, and there will be a certain number of them that will have misconceptions as it pertains to fractions. And so let's think as a grade level team, what are those hurdles in the content that kids will inevitably, a percentage of them, will go down, take a left when they should be taking a right. And let's plan for it. Let's not hope that this year they'll all get it, because the guarantee is that there will be kids that will have those misconceptions. So identify what the misconceptions are in advance, rather than being shocked about it each and every year.
I think that just comes to what we were saying yesterday, as assessments being such an important piece of your tier 1.
And and teacher knowledge developing. So if you go back to Deborah Ball's work on thinking about, we have content knowledge, we also have pedagogical knowledge, but there's a piece for mathematics that's very specific to mathematical, pedagogical content knowledge, right? So it's very specific to the domain of teaching mathematics. And it's something that a lot of our teachers haven't had the opportunity to really explore, learn, develop, refine, right? Talk about, work collaborative, can't say the word, collaborative, I seriously can't say the word, collaboratively on. Yeah, there we go, finally got it out. Yeah, and what are we doing in our systems to ensure that we can help shore these pieces up that we see as open areas for learning, right? There are opportunities for us that if we could invest some resources too, we could probably change student learning and student achievement. One more thing from your tables, so if someone has something they're burning to throw into the conversation. So really we want to come back and we want to look at, we need to have high quality research-based tools. And the assessment tools that we were talking about here just a moment ago fall within that as well. It's not just your textbook, it's also your assessment tools within that. And do teachers really understand how to use those tools effectively? Well, that's probably going to require resources, time, energy, subs, right? Subs are always an issue. And how do we plan for that ahead of time so that we can ensure that all of the money that's being spent on those resources is being used effectively?
An important part of that teacher change piece inside of that is that the resources allocated for her to be out of the classroom when she's working with those students and feeling those struggles, to now talk about my math data. It's like an extended kind of math data team conversation, right, over a couple of days. That's what changed practice. You know, it does change practice in the summer. However, boy, you still have to come back and do something that's very timely in her moment of need, or a teacher's moment of need, in that resource allocation. I think that's in mathematics in particular. They don't have that in many, many places, yeah.
And the kinds of mathematics experiences that we're talking about in Tier 1 require adequate time for a period of mathematics. A 45-minute mathematics period makes it very difficult for a teacher to allow kids to get into in-depth problem solving with rich tasks. So really thinking about the structure of the day and the access to time that children have to actually work with mathematics, which might mean more professional development, because if the teachers have been teaching for years in a 45-50-minute class period for math, they will be uncomfortable, no doubt about it, with having a longer time for math. They're used to the routines that they've developed, and that's part of their pedagogy, right? They know how they're going to structure that time, and so we have to help them with that. Your mathematics standards also offer a couple pieces that if you aren't aware of, we actually made copies of, because these are the pieces within the standards document that oftentimes for mathematics get kind of pushed aside. And there are 8 guiding principles that really gets into the philosophy for math instruction that are part of your standards in the state of Massachusetts. The standards for mathematical practice are about what kids should be doing, what kinds of engagement should we be seeing with the kids, what kind of experiences should they be engaged in. And so if you're not familiar with these pieces, we did include them here for your reading pleasure. Don't leave it too long, right? But if you are familiar, then I would ask the next question about how are these being supported with your teachers in your system for providing solid, rich, Tier 1 experiences with access to a range of learners. So then, thinking about about the teacher knowledge, we talked about that, but then the coaching comes into play with this. What kind of access to knowledgeable coaches and experts are your math teachers getting? And it can be peer-to-peer. It doesn't necessarily have to be experts from outside of your system. Sometimes just that time to collaborate as a team. And so do you, in your structure, have time that is set aside for mathematics, teaching and learning conversations? If you have 50 minutes of planning for each teacher each day in an elementary school, then you have to wonder how much of that time is actually devoted for mathematics. And if you are an elementary teacher, what is the messaging about prioritizing different subject matter? Because it could be that there is a kind of an unwritten messaging system that's going through saying literacy, literacy, literacy.
In thinking about teachers' time with some of those resources, and thinking back with, there were this one assessment that could get me right into these spaces. That knowledgeable expert in multiple areas of mathematics really can save you time with teachers, right? Like they lead that, they plan that, they have the vision, and you know, I understand, but that can be a segue piece, that expert in the room is beyond an expert of just, I can do math quickly. It's the pedagogical content expert across vertical, you know, grades that can make a difference.
Okay, other pieces in here, collaboration, we're talking about using data effectively. And I would be, I'm going to throw out just a little word of caution here in that you really need critical consumers of your data, because not all math tasks are generating the data that you really need to improve instruction in your building. So critical consumers of that data. And then your leadership skills, your leadership techniques, your leadership communication, right, is going to be very important in the system. So invest in those, right? That's the message here. Figure out where your needs are. Make a plan. Figure out how you're going to allocate the resources and get the ball rolling, right? Don't be bashful.
And to piggyback just quickly, the resource, so on your handout, on the back under the resources, there's also the link to your curriculum and instruction department here at DESE has a site that vets high quality core resources for mathematics. 6 through 12 is further along than some of your elementary curriculum. It goes through a process. That process is described online. That link will get you right to if you're looking for kind of some evaluations of your own curriculum.
So turning the corner then into tier 2, because some of the conversation that was popping up here a moment ago was really kind of turning that corner into how do I provide tier 2 instruction. Well, there's some opinions out there about what tier 2 instruction is. First of all, the not supplanting, that it is supplementing instruction, right? I think we've heard that message loud and clear these last 2 days. Opportunities to practice skills necessary for core instruction or strategies for enrichment. That's what I'm hearing here. Don't leave out the kids that are already capable of doing this content. Figure out how you're going to keep them engaged in mathematics during your mathematics time and beyond. Tier 2 supports occur in addition to Tier 1 supports, and they're generally done in small groups. Now, what's a small group? No more than 8. Anybody got another opinion?
No more than 5.
No more than 5. Anybody have another opinion?
Any subset of the whole group.
Any subset of the whole group. Could be 16, right? Okay. That has to be determined locally, right? And some of that has to get down to how effective do we want that time to be, right? And if you have a group of 16, are you reaching every individual learner? Is that the intent of your Tier 2 instruction? I just raise these questions because I think they're things that you have to consider with your staffing, right? Your other resources available, and how you set up your program? No, probably just happened to be at that time. So some recommendations are that Tier 2 within a multi-tiered system of support should focus on our key math concepts and should run about 20 to 40 minutes, 4 to 5 days a week. There is some research out there about frequency. And so only doing this once or twice a week is probably, you're going to get that return on that investment, right? If you only invest 1 or 2 days, you're probably going to see the return actually stretched out over a very long period of time. Do we have that time to give? And I think you just have to be honest with yourselves and ask that question. Or can we leverage those resources so that we can set up more intensive, more focused opportunities for your Tier 2 instruction as well? Okay. So Tier 3 is not dependent on having had Tier 2 support in an MTSS system. Now that's kind of a change up from things that we may have heard in the past, which is approaching it from if I am going to refer a child for special education services, we need to have provided interventions and reflected on the effect of those interventions, right? But when we're talking about this multi-tiered system of support, if our assessment tools pinpoint that intensive intervention is needed and needed now, then we don't monkey around with the Tier 2 prior to getting that child into Tier 3. So how do we allocate the resources so that Tier 3 interventions can happen in that way in your system? So here's some opinions, I guess, about Tier 3 in a multi-tiered system. They're referred to interventions based upon teacher review of multiple data points. That is something that I didn't hear come up in the conversation yet. Right? So not only multiple data points, but teachers are the ones making these recommendations, not just the data itself. Okay? Interventions may include small groups of 2 to 3 students. Why 2 to 3 or 1 to 1? It's intensive, right? If we really want to get in there and make a change, we've got to be able to pinpoint that instruction moment by moment. And the time period we're talking about here is 30 minutes, 5 times a week. And optimally, we want to offer some short-term intervention in there. We hope to close that gap in a short amount of time, not drag it out year after year after year. That research that came out, well, I don't know, 15 years ago or more about Title I interventions not making any headway because kids are just perpetually in Title I. And so we really want to look at this as how can we help students get up to a level with their peers and be successful in the Tier 1 instruction. Here's a kicker. Most intensive needs, most knowledgeable teacher. So how do we allocate resources in order to develop that knowledge base so that we have a core of interventionists and we move away from the parent volunteers, the paras, right, being the ones that are working with our most needy kids. So within your systems, and so I just throw this out as a general question, within your systems, are you currently driving forward a Tier 3 intervention that is meeting these criteria? And if not, what steps could you take to maybe move in that direction?
One of the pieces this pushes on, I think, is that idea in mathematics that a Tier 2 support is a little slower, Tier 3 support a little slower and louder, and let me go get a different box. And if I set kids through this, or if I get a different computer program and I put them through this, that support's going to support the core, right? And what we're pushing on here is that it isn't, that's not quite like where mathematics as an academic area is in our core instruction. That there are, you know, yeah, we're receiving that high quality core instruction. And then additionally, the support, that tier 2 support, is working on the parts of mathematics that will support the advancement, right? We've had multiple conversations about the facts, like drilling the facts, not the answer, and that's certainly not the answer. So you have to, so knowing what is, and that critical consumer of, inside of the high quality resources, of what are the ways they're offering to differentiate, and what are they differentiating on, right? It isn't just about less problems. It's actually about access to the content that will create a cognitive shift that will allow you to understand that next level. And there's a lot of nice research out there about some mathematical cognitive shifts, actually.
So envision in your head a group of identified 8th grade students that need intensive intervention in the middle school. How are you going to set up an opportunity for those students to close that gap? The good news is a lot of times with the older students, once you can peel the onion back until you get to the root causes. Once you address those root causes, the dominoes can fall very, very quickly for those students. So they have been learning things. It's just all the connections maybe haven't been there, which I think is getting to what you were saying earlier. So not to give up hope, and I think a lot of times our teachers are going, but I have to teach all of this that they're missing. But the truth of the matter is, sometimes if we get to that root cause, they already know the in-between stuff. We've just opened all the doors for them, and they are able then to jump ahead a significant amount. Kind of a no-brainer, right? Okay, so we want to kind of talk about this local leadership. You mentioned the importance of coaching. It's also the messaging that's coming through from your leadership and the support you're able to give to your leadership. I want to just share a little video of 2 in-building coaches, math coaches, that are just getting started, and just hear a little bit of their story here. So we have a little video to share.
Can you share where they're from? Can you share what
Yeah, they're from Ludlow. Is anyone here from Ludlow? Yes.
Hi, my name's Jen Potter. I'm the math specialist at Chapin Street School in Ludlow for grades 2 and 3.
And I'm Chrissy James. I'm a 5th grade math and science teacher at Veterans Park Elementary School, which holds 4th and 5th grades in Ludlow, Mass.
This past year, Chrissy and I went through the math recovery interventionist training so that we could become champions for the district to train other teachers in ADMR 1 and 2. So let's see, you guys want to know about how we use our data to choose our groups. We both do things a little similar but a little different because this is the first year that Ludlow is really implementing, I think fully implementing into the 3 elementary classrooms. I test all the kids that the teachers feel are having trouble with math, and I test all the assessments on them. And then we pull children according to the addition and subtraction constructs, and we decide that if they're tier 3, that we will pull those kids, and then from there we make groups to address their needs.
And at Betts Park, that holds 4th and 5th grade, we try to test all students in 4th and 5th grade in the structuring and addition and subtraction assessment. And we then group out the students based on their assessment results. And we have an enrichment block where we're able to separate students and target their instruction based on their different levels on the different assessments. And then we're also able to get together 2 out of the 8 days of our enrichment period with just the teachers and plan based on our previous lessons and understanding so that we know what's coming next and know where to move them next in their instruction.
And our target, we target the instruction through that construct of the addition and subtraction, but then also look at the other weaknesses that we found through the assessments and try to address all areas, kind of using like the MRIS way of planning, doing 10 minutes in each area. I think growth-wise, we look at, we're testing after, we're going to be reassessing after 6 weeks. We're also using those group assessments in the book to move kids along to decide if they are ready to move from being unitary to composite, and whether or not they're ready to move the numbers, the range of numbers that they're able to work with successfully.
And we do the same. We meet every 6 weeks at data teams, and we are able to decide if students need to move. We're pretty lucky that we're able to be flexible in our groupings and move students before the 6 weeks if needed. But it is nice to have a set time that we get to discuss all of those things. We do the same, and we have 10-minute stations of each of the levels as well. And we only test at the beginning and the end of the year, but we also use the test group assessments in our groupings. And we've also both seen that it just helps to build confidence in those struggling math learners. And that's like the best piece of growth that we both see. I know I take the Tier 3 students, and they usually hate math, and the first day they're telling me they're not good at math, they don't like math, they hate math. But then once we get going and they're doing tasks that are on their level, the confidence grows and their math grows, and then their like turns into love, and then they become excited. And so that's the best piece for us.
Definitely they're willing to be challenged afterwards, because now they feel they have a way to solve a problem and not feel like they have to. I feel like they don't feel like they have to solve it just the way that they've been shown to solve it. This is really, I think, the first year that Ludlow is diving into having the ABLR in all 3 elementary schools. So Christina and I will be talking and seeing what works and what hasn't worked, and we'll probably be revamping what we will be doing.
So trying on the leadership and the tools and how they're going to structure the support within their systems. And it is going to be a learning process for them. This was recorded, I believe, March of this current year. So fairly new, and so we'll be checking in with them to find out how they're doing and what changes they're making within their system. Because I think that's the other thing, is it has to fit within all of your other initiatives, and it has to connect to the ways they're teaching literacy as well, or science or social studies, right? It has to connect with those other best practices about teaching and learning. Most importantly here is that we don't lock things down so tightly that we lose kids and we exclude kids. So it kind of goes back to Katie's conversation this morning. Sometimes without even knowing it, we are actually setting up an exclusionary system. So we just have to be very aware of what we're doing and who it is including and who it might be separating out. So the fluidity within your system is extremely important.
And although the leaders were using their quick acronyms, like the heart of that is they're just using assessing and looking at what information they're getting about their students and the professional support that they have. That's and wherever you find it.
So we have just about 6 minutes here before the close of the session, and we have some opportunity just for you to work with your teams and at your tables to kind of discuss and maybe figure out a next step. When you go back into your system on Monday, what are you going to try to get kicked off in whatever ways that you can? And also, we're going to be walking around and answering any questions that you might have. So with that, I'm going to give you this time, but I also want to say thank you at this point, because if you end up needing to get up and leave, we understand that as well. Thank you very much. Thank you.